Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're watching from. Welcome to this edition of the Scott Ritter Show. The last couple weeks, I think headlines have been dominated by reports regarding intelligence leaks, documents that have been put on the internet, displayed on Twitter, Telegram, 4chan, other channels that purport to show some of the most sensitive secrets of the United States when it comes to issues like Ukraine, U.S.-Chinese relations, etc. There has been an individual who has been apprehended by the FBI, brought into custody, accused of being the perpetrator of these leaks. But there's just a lot of questions out there about how did this individual gain access to these documents? Are these documents in fact for real? Is the information in the documents doctored? Is this a larger disinformation campaign? Questions that get into issues like national security, intelligence, and such. So there could be a better guest than the one we're going to have today. A very experienced intelligence official from the United States, Larry Johnson. I also call him a friend and a colleague. Larry is somebody that has worked in the CIA. He's worked with in the counterintelligence, the intelligence field, with the State Department, and he's somebody who has been outspoken on this issue. Thank you very much, Larry, for coming. If there's anything about your bio that you want to correct, feel free to do so at this time.
I just want to express a disclaimer up front. Scott took me to play golf at the Army-Navy Club and didn't beat me too badly. So
I
harbor no ill will.
But, no, thank you, Larry, for coming on. Look, I think we should also put another disclaimer that although we're friends and we're colleagues, we oftentimes have disagreements on issues. Sure. But that's a good thing, because I think some of the times when you have issues of this complexity, the notion that we, people like you and I, are going to spoon feed an audience answers is right. Absurd. I think sometimes the best thing that can happen is that we have a discussion and let the audience see things. Now, I'm not saying that we're in disagreement here. I'm just saying that there are times when dogs decide to bark in the middle of a program, and the mailman just decided to come to my door, but I'm going to ignore him for a moment. I'll tell you what I'm going to do, Larry, is I'm going to turn it over to you while I mute the microphone, and maybe you can give your perception of what's going on with the leaker, and are these documents genuine, and and things like that.
Sure. So just to put this in context so that your listeners understand why I deigned to opine on this. I spent 4 years with the Central Intelligence Agency as an analyst, but also worked part-time in the Directorate of Operations. I also happened to work in the Operations Center, where one of the documents that was leaked was prepared. Up until about an hour and a half ago, I was convinced that there was no way this kid could have had access to that CIA Operations Center report. I have now had a friend who's still involved in the community, without specifying which agency, has reached out to me and says, man, he said, I agree with you. There's something not right about all of this. This stinks. It doesn't make sense. But he said, the CIA has deployed so many operations officers out in these military commands that they have made JWICs available to them. And JWICs is the top secret side of the computer world within the intelligence community. So that document was actually available on the server at the Air National Guard unit up in Massachusetts. But it begs the question, why in the world would someone who's described as a technician be reading that kind of document or even know where to look for it? That's number one. But over the course of 23 years after I left the State Department's Office of Counterterrorism in '93, I provided consulting services. I was a State Department subject matter expert for a team that supported JSOC, SOCOM, Special Operations. We scripted terrorism exercises. I was involved with the scripting of over 253 both exercises, and execution, scripting and executing those. So I had extensive experience sitting inside SCIFs all around the world. I was at Fort Bragg, I was at Southcom down in Miami, I was at Northcom out in Colorado, Stuttgart, I was at both AFRICOM and UCOM, CENTCOM, SOCOM are both at MacDill. So, I was in all of them. And in my experience, I never saw any E3s running around. Uh, One of my friends who is familiar with the Air Force now, a more recent vintage, has confirmed. He says it's crazy, but he says the Air Force has been hiring these youngsters, 19, 20, 21, and giving them these extraordinary clearances. He says, so that's not wrong. That's not wrong. But he says the issues that are wrong is that the documents that were available that could have been taken, that should have been taken, weren't. I find that fascinating, as well as pointing out that all of this, the story originated with Bellingcat. And Bellingcat, as you know, Scott, is an MI6 front that's received money from the CIA. Bellingcat was notorious back during the so-called sarin gas attacks in Syria that were ostensibly carried out by the Syrian government, when in fact they were carried out by the rebels that were being funded by the Brits. It was a staged incident. And Bellingcat was in the lead in trying to sell the lie in that story. So their mere presence in this story, coupled with the fact that one of their former colleagues is now a reporter for the New York Times, just puts red flags up all over. So it is the other issue that I still haven't resolved is this kid is part of the National Guard. They're not a fully activated unit, is my understanding, which means they do 1 month, drills 1 weekend a month. Well, which weekend is it? Was it the weekend of March 4th, March 5th? That means, because these documents were posted on March 4th, that means that kid had to get in there, come to drill, and he's not working unsupervised. I mean, you've been involved with this long enough that you don't let some E3 just come in and say, "Oh, I'm going to determine what I'm going to do for the day." They have a chain of command. They have non-commissioned officers. They have lowly lieutenants up to lieutenant colonels and colonels parading about. And particularly if you're in a SCIF, you don't just get to decide on your own, well, what am I going to do today? I'm just going to surf the web or, whatever. So just a lot of it doesn't make sense. I think I have no doubt that the documents are genuine. I have no doubt that the documents are primarily devoted to Ukraine and Russia and paint a very different picture from what has been presented to the American people by General Milley, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense. So when you combine those two facts together, I don't think the kid was doing this on his own. I think he was used. I don't know how he was used, but I don't think this is just a one-off and a serendipitous event.
Well, thank you, Fred. Just because we're speaking to an audience that may not understand some of the terminology used.
Sure.
Real quick, what's a SCIF?
Yeah, so SCIF stands for Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility, spelled SCIF, but pronounced like SKIFF. And when you go into an operations center, I put a picture up on my site at sonar21.com about last week about the CAOC, the Combined Air Operations Center that was up in Al Udeid, posted right on the CENTCOM's website. I mean, it's not like I was posting secret information. This stuff's all public. So in these operations center, it brings people together from different organizations within a particular military branch, such as the Air Force, as well as potentially if it's joint, which means you've got people from the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marine Corps, and from other government agencies such as State Department or CIA or National Security Administration. But the SCIF is set apart from that area, and the SCIF is designed to provide access for top secret information, top secret only. and you have to get into the room. Only American citizens are allowed in that room. Only people with top secret clearances. The likelihood that you could easily just print off papers and walk them out, not easily done. There are printers there, but they do have lots of information that they identify what people are doing, why they're doing it. And so you can, if you were just doing random searches, the way that the tickets, the access to that computer exists, it's going to send off red flags. Someone's going to say, well, why are you doing this? What are you looking for? Do you have a need to know?
Now, I'm going to bounce something off you and just get your opinion. I used to be involved in marine. Well, look, I look at your beard, Larry, and I see you got some gray in there. So you're of a certain age. Okay, and I would imagine that your resume dates back to the times that I was actively involved. And to give you an example, I think there was a time when, I know when I came in the 1980s, that top secret code word clearances were very rare. And only people that had an absolute need to know were given them. And to gain access to a skiff or a place where this stuff was stored, it wasn't just that you had the clearances, but you had to have a need to know, which generally meant that you were trained in the material that you were going to gain access to, and that training comes with schooling, experience, etc. So right off the bat, the idea of a E3, that's a low-grade enlisted personnel, working out of a Air National Guard facility in Massachusetts, gaining access to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff sensitive briefing documents seems ludicrous. And it would have been ludicrous back in the day because those documents never left the Pentagon. They never left the Sensitive Joint Operations Center. That was a contained area. But now as you mentioned today, we talk about connectivity. And I experienced this in the Marine Corps. We had a photo interpretation unit, a reserve unit, and you asked the question, which weekend does this reservist drill? But in the post-Cold War era, we started farming out because we consolidated the intelligence community. We got rid of the real experts. We retired all of the real experts, and then we stood up these reserve units so that they were drilling constantly. And we would rotate in different crews, and they would receive tasking from national resources. So even though this reserve unit was in Aurora, Colorado, it would receive tasking from NPIC in Washington, D.C., and so the tasking would come in over the computer. These guys from Colorado would be looking at things of a national level, annotating them, printing them out, doing workups on it, putting them back together, then sending it back. And I would postulate that could be what was going on here in Massachusetts, that this Air Force Reserve Intelligence Unit was being tasked as part of the Reserve National Tasking to help the J2 of the Joint Chiefs put together briefing documents, etc. This kid would have been able to gain access to this information in that matter. Is this crazy, or is this something that would make sense from your point?
No. I think it makes a lot of sense. And in fact, focus on the identity of this unit, the 16th Air Force, and then I think he was the 102nd Intelligence Organization within that Air Force unit. What do they focus on? Information warfare, cyber warfare. Well, again, I don't think that's just a coincidence, because maybe it's because of the nature of their focus that the access to those kinds of documents existed, and also the opportunity, if you will, from a CIA officer working around those individuals to do some spotting and assessment of, who's the kind of person we could potentially use, and how could this information be leaked. But no, it definitely, what you posit, sure.
Now here's something else to chew on. just because, and I'm just going to throw out a hypothetical and tell me if you agree with me. Just because you have a document that's top secret with all the fancy code words up there, does that mean that the information contained in it, even if it wasn't manipulated, it was the honest information actually put it, does that mean that information is 100% accurate?
No. In fact, I've seen as you have seen, lots of times that material gets put into a document, and it's complete garbage. I remember when I was a Honduran analyst, there was a DIA unit that had the name Seven Gamblers, and boy, they were bad gamblers. I'll tell you that, because what the information they put out was just junk, and yet I had a branch chief. When she came up, boy, she took what they were providing as if it was gold from God. And I had said, no, look, and they go in and try to explain it. So, yeah, that's an error that particularly people that have not worked in the intelligence community make the mistake and assumption that just because it has that code word, and these things, some of these things have some remarkable code words. When I saw SITK, Gamma, Orcon, I'm going, holy smokes.
I can't even say that, Larry.
No, I'm sorry. Well, I'm just reporting what's on the news, as they say.
I know.
And it's just, so, and then there was one of the documents. I think it was also the CIA Ops Center document had the word FISA, which right away you're going, holy smokes! Now we're into DOJ territory. Yeah. So it is just, it underscores part of the problem is the classifications oftentimes are used to hide information away from the public that would be embarrassing to the government if that information got out. It's not actually protecting a particular source or method of collecting that intelligence. And so I think there needs to be that distinction. But oftentimes the classifications are used as a stick to beat people with, just to keep them in the dark, while foreign adversaries or so-called adversaries who have intelligence services like Russia, like the Chinese, like the French, the Israeli, they're able to actually have a far better grasp of what the United States is doing. So, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to make that point because one of the things that frustrated me in this whole leak experience is how our media would take a document and then take that information and run with it as if it were the word of God, as if the burning bush had been lit, and therefore everything in this document is true, and therefore the public must understand that this is the gospel according to the CIA. But the fact of the matter is, and again, I'd like your insight. I'll give a quick experience from mine. James Clapper, former CIA director, used to be the head of the imagery. I mean, they change their names so often, but what used to be NEMA became something else. But he is acknowledged in his book and afterwards that his organization was tasked with, it's an imagery analysis organization, so they look at imagery from national technical means, and basically they were told to find proof of Iraqi weapons of mass destruction. And so he said that he ordered his analysts to find weapons of mass destruction capability looking at imagery when no such capability existed, and then they produced reports that ended up in the briefing documents for the President of the United States, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, etc. And I bring this up because I'll give you an example. People point to the casualty figures that were contained in one of the briefing documents. And a lot of people assume that those casualty figures had to be based upon really good intelligence. And my position is that because the political sensitivity of those casualty figures is so high, that even within a document prepared for the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, people will be told to lie, to put in numbers that aren't true, to shape the data for political purposes. and that sometimes the intelligence community is in the business of deceiving people on purpose, and that's why you can't believe the numbers. Am I off base on this, or is there justification?
Oh, no, heavens no. In fact, people need to understand these documents are a snapshot in time. And so particularly the documents that showed up on the internet were dated February 28th, March 1st, March 2nd. I can take you back. I think if I go back and look at sonar21.com, you'll see that I had written back around the end of February. I was in conversation with one of my friends who's still active in the intelligence side of things. And I asked him again, and he was careful not to divulge any classified information. He wasn't saying, yeah, I saw this, top secret this. But he did say that the Defense Intelligence Agency was taking information directly from the Ukrainians and republishing it with respect to casualties. And they'd kept doing that until like one day, and it was around March 1st, March 2nd, they changed just overnight. They stopped reporting verbatim what the Ukrainians were giving them, and then started caveating it, said, well, we don't know. And in fact, that's reflected in one of these documents where in the bluff, the bottom line up front, at the summary paragraph at the start of some of these documents, they state very specifically that, the polite way that they said it very diplomatically, but we think the Ukrainians are lying to us about the numbers they're given. So that, but again, you got to understand it's a snapshot in time. It's like I said last week that based upon my experience and based upon talking to another friend, a retired CIA officer who's still working in military SCIFs, that there's no way that this kid could have had access to a CIA Ops Center report. Today, I have to revise that because I've now received updated information from somebody who knows that, in fact, that document is available because the CIA personnel have been assigned to these military units, and therefore they have access. So that what I was reporting last week was accurate as far as I understood it based upon the knowledge I had, but that changes over time. Well, the same thing with these documents. Anybody that looks at them as if, oh my God, this is the final truth. Yeah, it was the truth as of February 28th, or March 1st, or March 2nd, as people understood it back then. But as you have, I always listen to your analyses on a variety of channels, and the real fundamental change that is reflected in these documents is the loss of the air defense system of Ukraine. They no longer are able to do layered air defense, which means that the Russian Air Force with fixed wing using the glide bombs has dramatically stepped up its activity, and those bombs carry far more lethality and damage-causing capability than any of the missiles that were being launched previously. So that has significantly altered what's taking place on the ground, and whatever assumptions they had on February 1st or February 28th or March 1st about an upcoming counteroffensive has had to be revised, I'm sure, in light of the Russians stepping up and using those weapon systems with more frequency and accuracy.
I think what you're saying, Larry, is that a good analyst is not a prisoner to a former piece of analysis, that a good analyst continues to update information and alter and adapt the analysis as the situation evolves. And I think some people confuse that with ignorance or a deliberate deception, and it's not the case. The fact of the matter is, right, you always have to be adapting as you go. Now, again, without we both have to be careful here because of our background, so we can't say too much. Right. But and to the audience, when I say that, please don't think that we're hiding something from you, because we're not. There's really no secret code out there. Life is pretty simple. It's just that some things you're not allowed to talk about, even though it doesn't matter. But what do you think? I've been looking at these documents, and one of the reasons why I have trouble thinking that it's a great conspiracy is that my understanding of the way the Russians work, and it's the way we work, We want our own opinion. The reason why we have a giant intelligence community is that we want to collect our own information and have our own people assess it, so that the judgments that are being drawn from this are judgments that we make based upon our needs, our wants, our desires. And we are
Right.
very reluctant to allow outside information to come in and shape our decision-making process. So the idea that we are pulling off a con on the Russians by releasing this information to get the Russian intelligence services to absorb it and reevaluate things to change their direction, to me that just seems a little weak. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, people watch the spy movies, and because just the classifications on some of these documents and the information contained in them would reveal likenesses or methods for how that information was collected. And I, for the life of me, cannot come up with any reason why whatever benefit might be gleaned from supposedly fooling the Russians would exposing that kind of source or capability. So the other thing is, we in the understand is our human capability is terrible. It has really been seriously degraded over time, and increased reliance on what the intelligence folks call liaison reporting. That means that if Scott was an intelligence officer and I was working for the CIA still, I'd go to Scott. Scott would give me information, and then I'd write up an intelligence report based upon what Scott Ritter told me, the Polish intelligence officer. That is liaison reporting. Well, that's a far different thing than if I have a source that's directly in the general staff of the Russian military, or that's in the office of the president of Vladimir Putin. Kind of direct information that we rarely get. And many times the United States intelligence community is being told that Canadians will say, "Oh, trust us, we got somebody on the inside." They're far out stories. In contrast, the Russians have extraordinary human capability. They have not working against a language barrier. Because even many of the Ukrainians who are espousing the need to speak Ukrainian don't speak Ukrainian. As I think you've noted as well, that Zelensky has a terrible, he's very poor with his Ukrainian, he's real good with his Russian. And plus, a lot of these people served previously into the served in some of the same military units. So just the human standpoint of recruiting somebody is far easier for the Russians, as well as then throughout penetrating NATO. So I think the United States and NATO are at a disadvantage on the human intelligence front vis-a-vis the Russians. And the intelligence dynamic game, as you know, what may be true last week may not be true this week, and it constantly has to be updated. This is not like a religious confession. Stick with it.
Well, and this is an important point, Larry, because these documents give us, as you said rightly so, a snapshot in time. They give us a picture, whether it's accurate or inaccurate, a picture from a point in time. But there's something about these documents that is timeless. And to me, that's the most important aspect of these documents, and the one that nobody's really focused on. But you did, you brought it up. You can reverse engineer all those fancy words at the top of the document that are linked to a paragraph, and you can find out how we collected information. And that, to me, is the greatest damage that has been done here. Not that we gave away what some analyst was thinking back in February, because as you point out, that's no longer valid today. Too much has happened. The world has moved on. But the collection methods